With the first pick, with the second pick, with the third pick, with the fourth pick,
crashing the boards.
Select.
Hello and welcome back to Crashing the Boards, episode 5. I'm Evan Skilliter, joined by Jordan Foote as always. Jordan, good to see you for episode 5, cruising along still. What's going on, man?
Can you believe it's episode 5? Because I can't. Like that means 15 guys in the books. We're actually going to have a 4th guy today that we're going to chat about. It's hard to believe, but it's also awesome that we've been mowing everybody down so far.
That's right, man. It's been awesome. It's been really cool. I'm starting to see my own. Again, we're not a big board show or a mock draft show, but I do have my own kind of idea of these guys. And, as we do these in-depth research, I've been seeing my big board kind of change and shift and become more solidified. So it's been a really good time. Maybe we'll consider right before the draft putting out some sort of big board or ranking, but that's not our focus here. We'll talk to you later about that.
Yeah, we're not that type of show, but
right.
It's tempting, to kind of, it sucks ranking these guys. And we talk about Simon Rath on the show quite a bit, but he just is a really good guy and has good stuff. I think his is in tiers, and that's probably how I would do it. Because you're really splitting hairs if you're picking between 2 or 3 guys or a group of 5. It's hard to do that. And then people forget it's about the team too.
Yeah.
Like the team fit, where these guys land. There are going to be some guys that we speak really glowingly of on this show that end up in situations that aren't advantageous to them. And that doesn't mean the player is bad. It just means that the fit isn't great. I mean, you see guys like Kevin Porter Jr., people thought he was in the right place in Cleveland, then went to Houston, was really doing some damage. So the team fit is half of it, and the other half is the player.
Yeah, 100%. We don't know. Well, we can guess what a team's needs are, but unless we're in the front office talking with some of those guys, their list of needs or wants, they could be completely different than what we expect. So, yeah, we won't be ranking players, but again, keep tuning in. Look at our old episodes for just hopefully as in-depth profiles as you'll find out and about on each one of these guys. Today, we're going to break down the games of G League Ignite's Jonathan Kuminga, Florida State's Scottie Barnes, international prospect out of Belgium, Vrenz Bleijenbergh. And we'll talk about a bonus prospect as well. An NAIA guy, hasn't been playing D1 basketball. He's a 2-time NAIA All-American. His name's EJ Onu. And I've seen a couple people tweeting about him, seen some videos out there on him. Hopefully we can get you a little bit more informed on EJ's game. He's either going to be, we'll talk about it later, but he's either going to be a guy that ends up as a pro after this year. He's entered the NBA draft, but also I think he's in the transfer portal. And he may end up just at a Division I team or Division I school that helps him develop a few areas of his game, which we'll talk about later. But before we get started, make sure you check out last week's show. If you haven't yet, we broke down Trey Mann, Ayo Dosunmu, and Ja'Cory McLaughlin. But we'll get right into this week. And we'll start with Jonathan Kuminga, 6'8", 205-pound small forward. Again, played for G League Ignite, pro player as his first year, or instead of college, 15.8 points per game, 2.69 assists, 7.1 rebounds, 38% from the field on 14.3 attempts, 24% from 3 on 5 attempts, 62% free throw shooter, and 2.6 turnovers to go along with those 2.6 assists. So if you haven't watched a ton of film on Kuminga and you just heard me rattle off those numbers, you're probably scratching your head a little bit here, wondering, wait a second, 38% from the field, 24% from 3 on 5 attempts. Like, what's going on here? But Jordan, Kuminga's a top 5, top 6 guy because of his upside, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing to bring up with him, his measurables and his athleticism, and those two are going to take him very far. He has a pretty big frame. Defensive potential is great. The wingspan, I believe, is like right at 7 feet, which is pretty impressive. Um, Great length, just a really impressive overall physical presence, and he can still add on some weight to that frame, I think, as he guards bigger wings and maybe even power forwards or something like that. And then he has an elite burst and vertical. He covers ground with in the full court. He has really impressive strides. I think that was something I noticed when watching him. Good rebounder, can grab and go, quick feet on defense, plus finisher at and near the rim. I mean, he's just explosive. And then I noticed fluidity in his game, and that
Yeah.
kind of goes against the transition into numbers and the percentages being high. But he has an improved handle. His center of gravity can get really low sometimes. That's one thing I noticed on film, which is extremely impressive. Creates space for his shot. Now, the shots don't always go in, but creating his own looks isn't really a big problem for him. Like, he can use his handle and create space and step back, things like that, rise up over defenders. He shows flashes of being a go-to scoring option, I think. Improving reads in the pick and roll. You mentioned that the assists and turnovers are essentially the same. So there's some work to do there for sure. But he gets to his spots, just needs to kind of convert.
Yeah, man. In fact, one of my notes here, the second note that I made gets to his spots, makes space, and he's got a smooth jump shot and a confident jump shot, right? You got to be confident when you're shooting 38%, but still taking 14.3 or 15 shots a game. It's super smooth, man. And you see
Mhm.
stuff like that. I know 62% free throw shooter. We always look at those free throw numbers to see if maybe a guy can improve if he has that touch. But man, when you watch it, it looks good, right?
Yeah.
It looks like a guy that can knock it down, and he's just maybe struggling a little bit with consistency, the mental side. You just don't know
Yeah.
unless you actually talk to him and you're around him often. But you know, I always say if a guy looks like he can shoot, if he's got a smooth release, it doesn't look clunky or it doesn't look uncomfortable, then he can improve with time, with reps. And I think most of Kuminga's game can be broken down or at least boiled down to if he improves these aspects, he'll be a phenomenal player because he flashes brilliance in a lot of different aspects of his game.
Yeah, 100%. And really to just transition into some question marks for him, those are both kind of can he improve things? And that's the case for all these prospects. But really, there are tangible places he can improve that I think he will improve and become a really good player. And the first one, will the shooting numbers improve? I mean, he struggled from deep, even though the volume was there. You mentioned his form is really solid. Like, he looks like a guy who's going to be a decent 3-point shooter. Good at generating his own opportunities. The free throw percentage doesn't really inspire confidence because sometimes we can look at guys and say, well, poor 3-point shooter, but shoots 85% at the line or whatever. So that makes them more likely to succeed in the future. That's not the case with him, but still the form looks fine. And then he's kind of merely a toolsy prospect in
Yeah.
terms of offensive game. And then can he reach? I think he has close to heliocentric potential on offense, like not completely. Makes kind of basic reads on offense right now. Is he more of a roll man than a pick and roll ball handler? Not the great assist to turnover ratio. He looks sped up at times, like he's waiting on the game to slow down for him. And then on defense, real quick, the tools are kind of greater than the substance. Sometimes he lacks a firm grasp of positioning. It looks like he's out of place every once in a while. He's just raw, and there's nothing wrong with that because he's a top 10 draft pick that has every tool to be successful.
Yeah.
Already an impressive player. But if he can improve on a little bit of everything, he's going to be a really good pro for years to come.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we jumped into question marks. I'm going to jump back for a second and talk
Okay,
about
my bad.
No, you're fine. You're fine, man. It goes with question marks too, but I noticed an ability to get to the rim with strength. Like he's not afraid of defenders, right? It's a guy, we talked about it with Jalen Green. He took a step from high school to pro basketball. And sometimes when you go and you take that jump, it's tough. The physicality of the game just kind of gets to you. And this is a guy that ran over some of those pro defenders, like literally looked like a wrecking ball on his way to the basket. So physically, yeah, he's only listed at like 205 pounds. You mentioned he could probably put on some more weight. I'd be afraid to try to defend him at 205, let alone 220 or 225 if he puts on some pounds. Like this is a guy that can get to the rim. Now the consistency finishing around the rim is a little shaky as well. But again, 19-year-old guy that took that jump from high school to the pros, and it's a big jump. It's the first time we've ever seen guys doing that at the G League level as well.
Yeah, and that's really the biggest part of the battle for young players sometimes is being willing to embrace contact or fight through it at the rim. You see guys still that they go up and then they kind of contort their body away from the defender, and then that impacts their finish at the rim. Kuminga is not necessarily that guy. He's just going to go right at you because he's sometimes bigger. If he's not bigger, he's more explosive, or he's jumping higher, or he's faster getting there. Um, he has all the tools to do it. And I'm going to say that a lot when I talk about him because there's still work to do in pretty much every facet, but he has the ability to do it. Like it's not like a player where you never see them developing this or they just aren't going to do that. That's not going to be part of their game. He has the ability to add all of this stuff and improve all of this stuff. He has shown flashes of it at different points in the season, and it was fun to watch him. Like, if you didn't read off the numbers, like, because we try not to look at numbers, I didn't know the numbers were that bad. Where it's 38% from the field or whatever it was.
Yeah.
If you watch him, you don't think it's nearly that bad because he's a fun watch. He's a player that's exciting to look at. So I think the efficiency will improve. Is that a red flag? I don't think so. Is it something to keep an eye on? Absolutely. But I think he's going to be okay.
Absolutely. So go ahead and give your summary.
I have him as a toolsy small forward with everything needed to be a top option at the next level. The rest is up to him.
Perfect. So let's move on to Scottie Barnes, another interesting guy out of Florida State. 6'9", 227-pound hybrid post, 10.3 points per game, 4.08 assists to 2.46 turnovers. 4 rebounds, 50% from the field, 27% from 3 on just 1.6 attempts, and 62% from the free throw line. Now, last year we saw Patrick Williams come out of Florida State. Patrick Williams, I'm not sure he started a single game for Florida State. Scottie started 7 of 24 games and played 24 minutes a game, but they were a good 24 minutes, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the defensive prowess is the first thing that jumps out to me, at least with Scottie. He has a big body with the insane length. I think his wing was like 7'2". Like he's an insanely long player for his position. He switched a ton at FSU. Like they relied on him to do a lot for a guy who was so young. Big enough to handle some fives and stretch bigs. Athletic and long enough to torment some guards and wings that just aren't that much quicker than him. Great instincts and anticipation. He played the passing lanes well. High IQ defender. And I put down one of my notes here that I forgot I even wrote down. He understands the assignment. And that's something that people throw around quite a bit, but he's just smart. He knows how to take a little bit off of this possession or defend this guy differently. He's a really, really intelligent defender. And then the offensive game, the number one thing that jumped out to me, it's his playmaking. And I don't think the assist numbers even necessarily do it justice. They relied on him to do a lot of that in college, better than the numbers show. Even when he's looking to score and attack, he still has that peripheral vision to set his teammates up, navigates extremely well in transition. That's something that will help him quite a bit at the next level. Pick and roll potential is the roll man. I think that you can run some DHOs with him. Kind of like a Draymond-esque role, not to completely compare him to that, but I think that I could see him doing something similar at the NBA level.
Awesome. Man, you named off a bunch of different things that go with my first point, and that's could play tomorrow in the NBA. And here's why. He's not a guy that's going to go out and score 10 points a game right away, but when you can play great defense and you can guard, we'll say 1 through 4, possibly 1 through 5 for Scottie. Because like you said, he understands the assignment. He's a smart defender. he can read the game. He understands the game well on the defensive end. So he's not going to hurt you there. And in fact, he's going to help you on the defensive end. And then on the offensive end, 4.8 assists to 2.46 turnovers. Yeah, the shooting numbers weren't the best. His shooting form's not the greatest. He may not be a scorer right away, but as long as he's good with just kind of being a facilitator, and moving the ball around a little bit, you tell him, hey, please don't take too many threes. Like don't go out there and start firing away, but help us move the ball around and keep our offense flowing. Like, he's a guy that can do that for you. So we may not feel like he's a flashy, awesome offensive gem for a while in the NBA, right? But he's a guy that can come in and he can help you out immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. He is a glue guy
Mm.
type player. He's a guy that is going to step in, and the numbers will not really necessarily define his impact, which that's the case for tons of players. But I think it's really going to be the case with him, where you look back on his rookie season or even his first couple of years, and you're like, well, he only averaged blah, 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 blah. You actually watch him play, you see how he helps the team. He's smart enough to where I think he really could step in from day one and give some really quality minutes. And it's not like he was playing 35 minutes a game in college or whatever. Like, he's not going to take a huge role in the NBA. He still has things he needs to work on, but the minutes he does play, they're going to be really good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we move on to some question marks. And we've already mentioned a lot of them, right? He shoots a low percentage, and he doesn't have he doesn't really show the ability to score from a lot of spots on the floor
Mhm.
right now. Um, he doesn't necessarily show a ton of burst either, just a lot of
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah.
So can he get to the basket? You kind of ask the question, okay, if you're going to be a facilitator, an offensive initiator, um, you know, if you can't score, can you still be that? Like, can you still be effective? Because you got to put pressure on defenses. They have to want to guard you and help out on you in order to free up space for other guys, right? So it's certainly a question mark. I don't know, Jordan. What do you think about his offense?
Yeah, no, I put will the shot develop, and that's going to open up not just the 3-point shot. Granted, it's kind of a slow release. I think that it might need to be reworked depending on what his initial team expects of him. Some teams are going to say that's fine the way it is. We need you to do other stuff. Some teams are going to say, well, we need you to be the complete package and hit your true ceiling. So we're going to rework that or tweak a couple things. He doesn't just take a lot of threes. Like, he just hasn't shown a ton of interest in being that player, but he's not really a self-creator on looks that aren't threes also. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't have an expansive handle, isn't extremely aggressive. Not to say that he can't tap into that, but he just hasn't shown a ton of it. Occasional soft touch, like around the rim, and when he's shooting, I've seen it a few times. Like, there have been some good looks from him. I see him as like a standstill shooter right now. If he's going to take threes, like a guy that can space the floor on certain possessions, and if you kick it out to him, he's going to take the shot. But in terms of a guy who can trail in transition and pull up for three or go from the paint outside, like, he just isn't that type of guy right now. Mixed results at the free throw line don't really indicate that he's going to become that, but it's something to keep an eye on in that it will make or break his true ceiling in the NBA, but he has a clear impact elsewhere. So it's okay for now, but depending on the team, they might want him to do a little bit more.
Absolutely. So how about a summary on Scott Barnes?
I actually had one more question mark, if that's okay.
Let's hear it.
Can he guard 1 and 5? And there's caveats to both of that. I don't think his lateral quickness might just be a touch slow for some shifty point guards, which that's the case for anyone who's, what is he, 6'9",
Fine.
225, whatever he is. So that's always going to be a problem. He's going to be tested versus shifty guards. There were a few times he got blown by where I was like, I don't know, something to watch. And then not a great matchup assignment against like back to the basket bigs, but in today's NBA, they're few and far in between. So adding mass, would it be worth it? Would he sacrifice a little bit of burst if he has to do that? Again, like, this stuff is going to be what his team wants him to do and what the assignment is, and he understands it. So I don't think that he can't become these things, a guy that can guard big players or a guy that can shoot some threes. But Right now, my projection, in summary, is a hybrid post with great defensive skills and playmaking traits that give him a high floor as a crucial impact player on the right team.
Yeah, I like that. And to touch on something I said earlier when I said he probably can guard 1 through 5, and then you brought it up as a question mark. I just want to clarify what I was saying. And that's, I brought up how smart he is, and you
Mhm.
mentioned it as well in your explanation. You know, yeah, sure, a back to the basket big is, it's a tough matchup for him, but I guess what I meant by being smart is that I think he can figure it out. And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
don't want him matched up with a back to the basket 5, but if he has to switch out and and give you a couple possessions against a post up player, I think he could
He has better
probably.
odds than
Yeah,
a lot of players would figure that out. Yep.
right, exactly. So we're gonna move on to another prospect, another one of my favorites in the draft. I hadn't heard much about him until I saw someone on Twitter actually posted about him. And if you don't follow at NBA Draft Scouting, so it's at NBA DRAFT Scouting with no G, so SCOUTIN. I think he might have ran out of space when he was coming up with the handle, which is okay. But if you don't follow him, you should, because there's some great content there. But he's real high on Vrenz Bleijenbergh. And Vrenz is a 6'10", 170-pound player with, I called him, maybe a power forward with dual forward potential. He's an initiator. We'll get into that. But in 26 minutes a game, he averaged 9.46 points per game, 3.5 assists, 2.5 turnovers, 4.8 rebounds, shot 37% from the field, 33% from three on 5.2 attempts. And he was 67% free throw shooter. Another guy, I don't feel like numbers quite do him justice.
Mhm.
Jordan, I'll kick it off and talk about. Um, I'll just give you a general overview, not necessarily a summary, but he's a guy that you could label a unicorn, a potential unicorn, right? 6'10" guy that can drive. He can knock down from deep, and he's got some passing chops to go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite thing about him is his playmaking, and the numbers don't do it justice. A gifted and willing passer. He is a guy that in transition really loves finding his open teammates. He doesn't get tunnel vision, not afraid of any tight window, and he had some turnover issues for a little bit there. But that shows he's not afraid to try any pass out and see if he can fit it in. Nice touch on lob and entry passes. There were several plays where I expected him to drive, and then he pulled back at the last minute, delivered a really nice lob pass. Quality pick and roll facilitator. I like him there, which a lot of 6'10, 6'11 guys aren't. They're kind of on the other end of that. So that's an impressive thing about him. Solid ball handler with good vision. So I really like that about his game. And then the perimeter shooting is another thing that I think is nice. And he's comfortable off the ball, consistent movement. He doesn't just stand and wait. Efficient volume three ball, relatively efficient. Still room to improve the shot in the base. Like I can't describe it, but there's just
Yeah.
something that is a little bit wonky and it still works. Kind of a low trajectory sometimes. So there's room for improvement there for him to become a really, really good shooter instead of an impressive one. And then I think two more quick pluses for him. He's willing to drive to the rim, and
Yeah.
sometimes the finishing is a little bit erratic, but for a guy who doesn't have much mass on his body, he's not afraid to do that. He has a decent burst for a guy that big. And then team defense, he's intelligent, rotates well, plays his angles. Like even in one-on-one matchups, he knows his limitations and he understands that and plays smart defense because of it. And then pretty decent anticipation. So there's a lot to like about this kid.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned his burst, and I was actually really surprised to see the way he
I
could
was
drive to the
too.
basket. He has fantastic foot speed as well. We mentioned that with Jalen Green, and I think Jalen Green would blow him out of the water in a 1v1 race. But he's got good strides. I mean, he's 6'10", but he looks coordinated when he's running,
Mhm.
just in a straight line, and that translates well to his driving ability. And I think you're right. Around the rim, he's another guy that shies away from contact, and that kind of forces him into making some awkward or trying some awkward layups and finishes, and you could definitely use some consistency there. But again, 6'10", 175 or 170 pounds, like the contact is really going to throw him off, right? So the driving ability is fun. He moves like a gazelle, kind of those long strides around defenders. I'm not comping him to Giannis at all, but just watching like watch his bottom half when he's driving to the basket, and there's some similarities there. They're, again, not the same player. Don't don't.
Evan, I think you just called him Giannis, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna
The
cut that
unicorn.
clip and tweet it out.
Yeah, please do, please do. But I won't mention Giannis again in this analysis here. But yeah, really like that ability to put pressure on defenses getting to the basket. And you mentioned his passing. He's a multi-tool player, and he can definitely find open players. He makes some flashy passes, some kind of goofy looking passes that work. Almost like you see Jokic make some funny passes sometimes, just so you don't expect him to make them. He's not even looking at the player he's passing to, and whatever it is, just a great passer. And you mentioned his defense as well. And I think I was really impressed by his ability to defend multiple positions.
Mhm.
He laterally great mover, vertically great mover, but he's actually deceivingly strong in the post. There are a couple times he got posted up, and he uses his lower half really well to create some leverage and to keep guys from backing him down. Now, maybe some of the guys he's playing against aren't as strong as NBA post players, and we'll see what happens at the next level. But the fact that he was able to hold his own in the post despite kind of a smaller frame, pretty exciting. Pretty exciting about a pretty exciting potential at that defensive end.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna note that because he held his own, and I didn't expect that to happen. Um, there were a lot of unexpecteds with him. Where
Yeah.
heading in, I was like, like I took a look at like the first few minutes of film, and I'm like, this guy, I think I have him figured out. And then like the more I watched, I was like, wow, this dude's actually like has a new layer to his game that I didn't think, or oh, he can do this and I didn't think he could, or oh, he's faster than I thought, or blah blah blah. Like there's just a bunch of potential with him and a bunch of stuff that just looking at him or his profile or his first couple minutes you wouldn't expect.
Right. So on the uh, so with question marks, excuse me, with question marks, we talked about that he doesn't really like contact at the rim,
Yeah.
right? And it affects the finishing negatively. The shooting consistency, you talked about the form. It's a little bit goofy, but he looks comfortable and confident shooting it. It's just a matter of can he knock it down at a higher rate? 37% from the field, 33% from beyond the arc. Those numbers aren't bad necessarily, but
Mhm.
you'd like to see him become a little more consistent from out there. I have down that he's not necessarily a tenacious rebounder. Yeah, he averages 4.8 rebounds in just 26 minutes. But he's 6'10". He should, he maybe it's a physicality thing, but
Mhm.
definitely want to see him be able to grab some extra boards with that size, especially if he's one of one or two bigs on the floor on an NBA offense or defense. And then I've got down, yeah, he's a great defender, but he's not always locked in
Mhm.
defensively. Maybe focuses a lot more on the offensive end than he does on the defensive end, but he's capable.
Yeah. My two question marks for him. Can he refine his on-ball game? I'd like to see some more self-creation moves and aggression in terms of the mid-range and stuff like
Yeah.
that from him, which that's a big ask for a guy that is so young and has a specific profile. But also, are we going to chalk up the turnovers on tape to youth? There were some, and I think that's a fair thing to chalk it up to that. That happens with a lot of players. They just try fun stuff, and he's one of those guys. But the difference with him and guys that have silly turnovers is I believe he can make those plays one day and actually has the potential to fire those passes in compared to some guys where they just get a little careless with the ball. I think he's just trying to improve on the fly, and there's nothing wrong with that because you have to fail in order to succeed sometimes. And then is he merely a off ball movement, spot up type player? I don't think he is. But it's going to be a test at the NBA level to see what he can do with the ball in his hands. It's not like a Scottie Barnes situation where he doesn't have the 3 ball or he doesn't have the burst or whatever, depending on where he plays. And that's my second question mark. Just what's his ultimate position or role in the NBA? Like, he's kind of big for a 3 in terms of length, light for a 4, but did hold his own in the post, like you mentioned. There's defensive pros and cons of each of those positions. How big can his offensive role get? How is he going to be used in the interim? Like, he's just an interesting player, and none of these things are huge question marks that are going to define his career, or that can hold him back significantly. But there's just a lot to process with him and a lot to like about his game, that depending on the team, and this has been a really team centric pod or recording now, it just depends, and that's not a bad thing sometimes.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. My summary of Vrenz is basically this: he's a multi-tool offensive player, with some aspects of his game, including consistency, still developing, and he's a defensive player, or a multi-tool defensive player as well. That, again, there's some space to develop physically and mentally at the next level, but he's a good player. And Jordan, if you look at mock drafts, he's normally not in the first round. Um, Sometimes pops up in the second round. Um, I keep wondering after watching the film. I think, man, this guy is good, and we went over this with Ja'Cory McLaughlin as well. Like, these are really good players. That are they getting overlooked, or are we missing something? Why do you think, with Vrenz specifically, why do you think he doesn't pop up on a whole lot of mock drafts, or like NBA draft.net, which I hate to reference them, but they don't
Sure.
have anything there. Like, what are we missing?
Not that I have studied those boards really in depth, because I haven't. Like, I've looked at them to see like where players like Vrenz are, but the numbers, maybe I could the numbers be partially a reason why, like, a guy that didn't get a ton of minutes necessarily, but then I'm sure there are players on that list who have worse numbers, or like a Jonathan Kuminga who has really inefficient numbers. But then again, Kuminga is a totally different ballpark of potential and player. But I don't know, could it be being a foreign player kind of naturally makes him second fiddle to some guys over here? The numbers, maybe. Could it be that the program he's playing for? I just don't know. Like, there's a bunch of things that I wish I could sit down with like a panel of
Yeah,
scouts
exactly.
or website people, not to like target them and say, hey, what's going on here, but hey, what do you see in this player, and why isn't he on your list, or whatever? Because out of 60 players, he's a top 60 player. I would
I
draft him
agree.
absolutely,
Yeah.
but I think it was, and I don't want to miscredit. I'm not even going to say which side it was on because I can't remember, but he was like 59th, and he
Mhm.
finally snuck into the second round of the draft. So I was happy to see that, but because I try to look up these players after I do my evaluation to see what other people
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
it's hard to find stuff on him and the next guy we're going to talk about. Even Ja'Cory, there doesn't seem to be a lot. And I know that we're not like pioneers of basketball scouting, so there's got to be people out there that have a shared appreciation for these guys, but maybe it just isn't um, published or
Yeah.
whatever. It seems like Twitter is more of a place for that, and I'm sure that people have talked about Vrenz on Twitter and said that he's a great player and needs to be drafted. But online, it's just a little bit different, I guess.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. It's a great explanation. I think, and you kind of mentioned this too, like, maybe a question mark is, what is an NBA team going to do with him?
Yep,
Like, what,
exactly.
are you going to give him the ball and let him be your facilitator right away? Or, can he play off the ball? You mentioned that as a question mark too. Like, what can he do off the ball? I don't know, but I really like Brent's. I hope that he does get drafted. I hope we see him um, playing in a big role at some point down the road. So let's move on. Well, do you want to give a summary? I know I gave a summary. Do you have a summary?
I already closed out my notes. I think I had him as pretty much what you said, like a guy who um, just does a lot of fun stuff and has good potential. but just figuring out what to do with that is going to be the challenge. And that's a good challenge to have. I mean, you have a guy that does a lot of good, and figuring out how to bring the best out of him. That's what they're there for.
Awesome. So I want to have a quick discussion about a guy who we mentioned at the top. His name's EJ Onu, and he played a couple years at the NAIA level, two-time NAIA All-American, 6'11" with what I've read as a 7'6" wingspan. Um, I'm going to call him a center. We had a discussion before we started this. What is his position? I'm calling him a center with stretch big potential. And I know you kind of agreed with that, but you started with stretch big, which is fair, and we'll get into why here in a second. Couple numbers for you: 16 points per game, 8.06 rebounds, 4.5 blocks, 0.4 assists. Let's see, 57% from the field, 40% from beyond the arc on 3.9 attempts, which definitely jumps out at you, and then 75% from the free throw line. So Jordan, EJ is a guy that he's declared for the draft, but I believe he's left himself open to go to a different school in the transfer portal, take advantage of that extra year of eligibility. He could probably benefit from heading back to a Division I program that can get him ready for the next level. And I've read quotes online where that's kind of he has said that himself. I want to go somewhere that can get me ready and help me prepare. But this is a really good player. This is a fun guy to watch. And I'll kick it off and talk about maybe his offensive game a little bit. He's got great footwork in the post. He was dominant at the NAIA level. When you're 6'11" with a 7'6" wingspan, and have good footwork in the post, you're going to dominate at that level, right? And I was really impressed with his athleticism around the rim, his finishing ability. Most of his finishes came by dunking the basketball. I mean, he just flushes it home on guys' heads all day long. And then he can step out and he can knock down from beyond the arc. I saw there were a lot of times where he kind of lagged in transition and hung back a little bit, and just with the defense set, he stepped up to the 3-point line and they just handed it off to him and he knocked it down. He's a good shooter, and then he's an awesome rim protector on the defensive end. 4.5 blocks, great timing as well.
Yeah, you're going to be very surprised by this, but my two positives were the same two positives you had.
Yeah.
I think the offensive game is really nice. I like his post game. The jumper is clean. It's difficult to contest because he has the length. I put that he flashes that KP-esque and Christian Wood-esque ability to lag behind in transition and hit that pull-up three. So we were on the same wavelength there. Perfect potential to be a modern floor stretching big. On the defensive end, the thing that I noticed first and foremost, patient and accurate hands, because you can be a guy that has length and fouls a lot because you just don't know how to time blocks and stuff like that. He understands jump timing. He understands hand timing and arm timing and positioning, smart rotations, lateral quickness, a lot better than I expected. I read somewhere that he's like a track athlete or something, he has a track background. So really good athlete, times everything well. You know exactly what I'm going to talk about here. His second jump is very quick, and people don't really think about that very often, but I noticed it on tape. Like if he goes up for a block and misses it or a rebound or anything, his second jump is very quick, and that's going to help him at the NBA level. And there's a test for that people do in the combine process and stuff like that to see how well you're going to succeed at that at the NBA level. And he's such a big dude that like you don't expect him to be able to move the way he does, both vertically and laterally, and he can do it. So I thought that was something that I really enjoyed watching.
Yeah, and so with guys like this, we always see some Division II or NAIA guys pop up in the NBA every now and then. And it's fun. It's fun to get in on the ground floor, if you can call this the ground floor. Like I'm sure there are guys that have been on him since high school. Actually, I know one. Zach Fleer runs 270 hoops down in Columbus, Ohio. So EJ's from Cleveland, went to school at Shawnee State, which is an Ohio school as well. So Zach Fleer has known him since high school. He covers high school hoops. He does a great job, by the way. in Columbus. So I know Zach's been on the real ground floor, but it's fun to follow these guys, right? And there's a process that a lot of them have to follow. You talk about the unproven abilities. Like you played it at NAIA. We talked about this last week when people like to talk about what level they played at. NAIA is much different than mid-major. I mean, we talked about it with Corey McLaughlin, but when you talk about this, EJ's going up against guys that are 6'6" in the post rather than 6'11" with the 7'6" wingspan or whatever it is. So, we can see from the tape that he's got some good ability, but a lot of times these guys have to prove it. So whether that means going back to school at a Division I school and showing out, or going to a local G League tryout and getting on a G League squad, there have been guys that have paved the way through that too. He's probably got some proving to do. I didn't necessarily see him create or be able to drive or, really dribble. Didn't see him put the ball on the deck very often. But, there's a good chance for this guy to really show out and prove to scouts, my frame's not all I have, right? I'm a good basketball player as well.
Yeah, and oddly enough, my two question marks were pretty much the same as yours. The first one, can he prove it? Which means I think he would benefit from a jump to a D1 school. Like, I'm not actively campaigning for him to head back to school, but I think that it would help boost his draft stock. He would be more prepared. And it seems like he's kind of on that same mind frame in terms of, it seems like that's the best thing to do, or get on a G League team. That would also be great. Can he handle the jump? Can he showcase himself against NBA talent? I think he can, but it's one of those things where a lot of people will believe it when they see it, which sucks, but that's how the process goes. And then can he round out his game? Can he improve as a ball handler? Can he become a simple facilitator on offense? Is he quick enough to defend on the perimeter with a really high center of gravity? The pick and roll game could make or break his career, I think. Like, can he pick and pop? Can you run DHOs through him? Is he a lob threat? Stuff like that. That's what separates a lot of these guys that have the frame into guys that can be main pieces of an offense, like a Christian Wood. And I hate to keep bringing that up, but not that his game directly reminds me of that, but that was just the first player that popped into my head, a guy that improved his game every year and now can do a little bit of everything. He can step out and shoot threes. He's a great lob threat. He can block shots. Not saying he's a great defender, but he can block shots. So something that just we need to keep an eye on. And I think that center with stretch big potential is a much better way to put it, because right now there's still some work to do. I think that, let's see my summary. Stretch big potential. Okay, so I had that written down. Who could benefit from a D1 or G League season to develop the ancillary parts of his game while showcasing unique blend of length, mobility, and long range shooting.
Fantastic. It's a great summary. Make sure you guys follow EJ Onu. Remember the name, and make sure you refer back to us when he's getting drafted and he's playing at the next level, right? So that is our show, episode 5, little extended cut with 4 prospects for you rather than 3. We broke down Jonathan Kuminga, Scottie Barnes, Vrenz Bleijenbergh, and EJ Onu. So pumped you could join us. Make sure you tune in next week. Right back here as we break down Ohio's Jason Preston, VCU's Bones Highland, and Houston's Quentin Grimes. By the way, if you have any players that you want to see us discuss, whether it's lottery guys, first-round guys, or some fellas that aren't getting the love that you think they deserve, please reach out to either one of us on Twitter. I'm at Evan R. Skilliter. Jordan's at Footnoted with an E. And you can also shoot us a DM on Instagram. We're at Crashing the Boards Show. Someone else took Crashing the Boards, unfortunately. Once we get big, we'll buy it from them. But for right now, no sponsors. If you want to sponsor our show, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, Jordan, it's been a pleasure. It was a good episode. Pumped for next week as well. Do you have any final thoughts?
Hit that subscribe button. We're slowly but surely kind of getting off the ground with this. I think we had 5 or 6 new subs this week. So if you're watching this and you enjoyed the content, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when new episodes drop. We will have some separate possible interviews coming up potentially. We have one already with Colgate's Jordan Burns. We have kind of these separate prospect highlights. We have a Ja'Cory McLaughlin segment specifically on the YouTube channel. So we're going to be doing a bunch of new stuff and keeping that going. So hit that subscribe button. And thanks to anyone who's followed along so far, because it's been a blast, man.
Been a lot of fun. Until next time, stay right, stay real. God bless.
With the first pick. With the second pick. With the third pick. With the fourth pick.
Crashing the boards.